All right, so are you ready to dig into this whole nuclear power thing that's been making headlines lately? We're just weeks out from the Australian federal election, and as always, energy policy is front and center.
Yeah, it's definitely heating up the debate.
Peter Dutton and the coalition have come out swinging with this pretty ambitious plan, promising us cheaper and more reliable energy than renewables with nuclear power,
Right.
7 new nuclear plants across Australia by 2038.
It sounds bold, that's for sure.
But let's be real. I mean, how realistic is it that we'll actually see these nuclear power plants popping up all over the country?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, on the surface, it sounds pretty promising, a potential solution to a lot of the energy concerns that are out there. But when you start to peel back the layers, there's a lot of political maneuvering and internal conflict within the coalition itself that makes this plan, well, questionable.
Okay, so let's untangle this web.
Uh,
We've got some pretty interesting comments from some big names within the coalition that sort of hint at the motivations behind this whole nuclear push.
yeah, we do.
What do you make of Matt Canavan's statement? He's obviously a huge advocate for coal. And he's come out saying that nuclear power ain't the cheapest form of power. And he's even called the policy a political fix.
That's a pretty big statement coming from him.
So what's he trying to say?
Yeah.
What problem are they trying to fix with this nuclear policy?
Well, it seems like it's more about managing those internal divisions within the coalition, that struggle to find common ground when it comes to climate change. You've got your diehard coal supporters.
Yeah.
You've got those reluctantly accepting that we need to transition to cleaner energy sources, and then those stuck in the middle. So Canavan's comment makes you think maybe this nuclear policy is just a way to bridge that gap, present a united front to voters, even if it's not the most practical or cost-effective solution.
So are you saying it's more about holding the party together than actually solving Australia's energy problems?
I mean, that's definitely a possible interpretation. And then you've got Keith Pitt, a Nationals MP, who actually just up and quit politics altogether. He was very vocal about his frustration with the party's stance on climate change.
Right.
He was especially angry about the net zero target, arguing that it was hurting regional communities without actually making a difference to global temperatures.
It's a pretty big statement to leave politics over.
Yeah. His resignation really highlights the tension between supporting those regional communities, many of which depend on the fossil fuel industries, and the need to shift towards those cleaner sources of energy. So you start to wonder, is this nuclear policy a way to try and appease both sides? They can say they're doing something about climate change by pushing this seemingly clean energy source, but they avoid going all in on renewables, which could upset their pro-coal supporters.
So are they trying to have their cake and eat it too? Does this whole strategy even hold up when you think about the logistics of actually building these nuclear power plants in Australia?
Yeah, that's where things get a bit more complicated. I mean, remember Malcolm Pyne, the former defense minister? He weighed in on this and said that the main benefit of this nuclear policy is that it unites the Liberals and Nationals, even though the chances of actually building a nuclear plant in Australia are limited.
Hang on, so even within the coalition, there's an acknowledgement that this might never actually happen.
Seems that way, right? Like Pyne's basically saying it's more about perception than reality.
Mm-hmm.
It's about showing a united front, not about a solid plan for the future of energy in Australia. And let's be honest, when you look at all the practical hurdles they'd have to overcome, it's tough to disagree with him.
All right, so let's break down those hurdles then. What are the main roadblocks standing in the way of Dutton's nuclear dreams?
Well, I think the first thing is Australia has some seriously strict regulations about nuclear power, and for good reason.
Yeah, it's not something to be taken lightly.
It's a technology that can be great in a lot of ways, but it also has its risks. These regulations cover everything, from building and running those power plants to dealing with the radioactive waste. So the approval process, it's a long one.
I bet.
It's complex, and it's got to be thorough.
Right, for safety.
Exactly.
So it's not like even if the coalition was totally committed to this plan, it wouldn't happen overnight?
Oh, no, not a chance.
Years.
Years, maybe decades to get through all the red tape and build everything. And that's assuming people are on board, which, let's face it,
Yeah.
it's not going to happen. Australians are pretty passionate about nuclear power.
Yeah, I don't think a proposal for 7 new plants is going to be met with a lot of enthusiasm.
Yeah. There's a lot of worry about safety, especially after what happened at Chernobyl and Fukushima.
For sure.
And those concerns are valid. A nuclear accident could be catastrophic.
Absolutely.
It's a huge responsibility for any government.
And what about the waste?
Ah, the waste.
Nuclear waste disposal, that stuff stays radioactive for a really long time.
Thousands of years.
Thousands and years.
Yeah.
So how do you find somewhere safe to keep it all, especially in Australia?
It's a huge challenge. No one's really figured it out perfectly yet.
I can imagine.
Finding the right spot for a nuclear waste repository, it's political, it's environmental, it's complicated. It needs a solution that lasts. And honestly, the coalition hasn't even scratched the surface on that.
So even if they somehow manage to tick all the boxes with the regulations, get everyone on board, and find this perfect place to store radioactive waste for, what, millennia?
Right.
There's still the issue of the cost.
A cost, exactly. And remember, the CSIRO, they estimated that nuclear energy would be twice as expensive as renewables.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier.
Yeah, and those costs can easily get out of control, especially when you're talking about massive projects like this.
Yeah, delays, unexpected issues, it all adds up.
Exactly, and guess who ends up paying for all those extra
The
costs?
taxpayers, right?
The taxpayers. It's a classic story. And with the economy the way it is, everything getting more expensive, can Australia afford to gamble on something so risky and costly when there are other options out there?
When there are other options that are more affordable.
More affordable, yeah.
Like renewable energy.
Like renewable energy?
Australia's got so much potential for solar and wind power.
We really do. One of the sunniest and windiest places in the world.
That's true.
And the technology to use that has gotten so much better, it's more efficient, and it's cheaper than ever.
But some people say renewables aren't reliable. The sun's not always shining. The wind's not always blowing.
That's a common misconception.
Yeah.
While it's true that renewable energy sources aren't constant, their output can vary. There are ways to deal with that.
Yeah.
Battery storage, for example, is a game changer.
Oh, yeah. Batteries are getting better and better.
Exactly. We can store the extra energy generated when the sun's blasting or the wind's going crazy and use it later when we need it. It's about being smart, creating an energy system that works.
So it's not just about checking up a bunch of solar panels and wind turbines. It's about having a system, a mix of energy sources that work together.
Yeah, a diversified approach, including storage and all these new innovations.
And as that tech improves and the costs keep coming down, renewables just become more and more appealing for Australia.
Right. It's good for the environment, it's good for the economy, and it's good for energy security.
So considering everything we've talked about, it sounds like Dutton's nuclear goals are facing some pretty strong headwinds.
That's putting it mildly. It almost feels like this whole nuclear policy is more about scoring political points than it is about actually making it happen.
But if they know it's a long shot, why even bother? What's the strategy here?
Well, let's think about you, the voter. This election is super tight. Energy policy is always a hot topic. The coalition's trying to appeal to everyone, those worried about climate change and those worried about what moving away from fossil fuels will do to the economy. This nuclear policy, even if it's flawed and probably won't happen, lets them say they're tackling both sides of the issue.
So it's a balancing act.
A balancing act.
Trying to please everyone within their own party and the voters too.
Yeah.
But will it work? Will it sway voters? That's what we'll look at next as we dig into the politics behind Dutton's nuclear power play.
Okay, so we've established that Dutton's plan is, ambitious, to say the least.
Yeah, it's facing some major challenges.
But it's an election year, and you just mentioned that energy policy is a big deal for voters. So how is this nuclear idea playing out on the campaign trail?
Well, the coalition's betting that this bold, even if somewhat unrealistic, nuclear plan will make them look like strong leaders, decisive, ready to tackle our energy problems head on.
They're hoping to appeal to those voters who are tired of the same old debates.
Right, they want solutions.
Fed up with the back and forth on climate change and energy.
Exactly.
But is it working? Are voters buying it?
It's a risky strategy. I mean, sure, some people might be attracted to the idea of shaking things up.
A big change like this, it might seem like a real solution. But others, those worried about safety, about the cost, those who think it's just not feasible, they might be turned off.
And let's not forget the people who are really passionate about renewable energy.
Oh, absolutely. They're probably seeing this as a step in the wrong direction.
So the coalition's trying to walk this tightrope, make everyone happy,
A tough balancing act.
but maybe ending up pleasing no one.
That's the danger. And it could backfire big time come election day.
Yeah, voters are pretty smart these days.
Oh, yeah, they can see right through the political games.
They want real action, not just empty promises.
Exactly. They want to see a real plan.
So for voters heading to the polls, what's the key takeaway here? What should they keep in mind when it comes to energy policy?
I think it's important to look beyond the slogans and really dig into the details of what's being proposed.
Hmm.
Don't get swept up in the hype or the fear tactics.
Really think critically.
Ask those tough questions. How is this actually going to work? How much is it going to cost? What does it mean for our environment, for our economy, for our energy security in the long run?
It's about making informed decisions, not just reacting emotionally.
Exactly, because ultimately your vote is your voice.
Yeah,
Use it wisely.
well said. So that wraps up our deep dive into Dutton's nuclear power plan. We've covered the politics behind it, the practical challenges, and what it all means for you, the voters. Hopefully we've given you some things to consider as you navigate this election season, which, let's face it, can be a bit overwhelming sometimes.
Remember, knowledge is power. The more you know, the better choices you can make. Choices that reflect your values and help create the future you want for Australia.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time for another exploration of the topics that matter most.